Hello, everyone, and welcome back. Welcome to episode 15 of Self Pub Sunday. Today, we're joined by SPFBO number 9 author, Kian Ardalan. Kian, did I say your name right?
Yes, you absolutely did.
Oh, awesome. Okay. Kian is author of the Michelin series. Right now, we have book 1, 11th Cycle, and later on, we'll talk about maybe the future of this series. First, while people kind of settle in, I would like to kind of do an icebreaker here. So, your book is well known for being grim, dark fantasy. What other genres, if any, would you love to jump into at some point in your writing career?
It's funny you mentioned that. At the moment, in fact, over the past couple of months, I've had this growing fascination with the cyberpunk genre. I think there's something so interestingly compelling and very almost nascent in the way that it is a contemporary topic. It's very much up and coming in the way that we look around ourselves and we see a lot of these Black Mirror-esque themes all around us. And I feel it's a shame that we don't have more books in that genre. And in the same fashion where 11th Cycle was the result of me feeling like, hey, I want a book like this. There is, little to no books like this. I'm going to do it myself. I have very much that same itch for cyberpunk. I'm currently reading some books. I'm currently reading the Quantum Thief, which is a great cyberpunk book, and I'm going to be reading a lot more in the genre, and maybe in the future I'm going to be tackling that as well.
Awesome, that's exciting. So I want to talk about your writing career for a little bit.
Mm-hmm.
So have you always wanted to be a writer, or did you first know, like, this is what I want to do?
It's really, I think that's such an interesting question, not specifically for me, but for anyone who goes down this path. I think for me personally, it was something that I was always like pretty decent at. Obviously not perfect, but I feel like I had some natural talent. I was told so while in school. It was one of the few things where like I wasn't so good at maths, I wasn't so good at physics or what have you. But when I went to English class, and then that one time a year we did creative writing, this was the one thing that everybody would, quiet down to listen to. So I'm like, okay, I seem to be good at this. I wanted to originally go down a path of doing movies, maybe, directing or something like that. I think things just ended up taking a turn here and there, and I found myself right back where I was in writing. I picked it up as a minor hobby while I was doing my bachelor's. Mm-hmm. I wrote some stories on writing prompts on Reddit, and I would get comments like, "This is amazing. You have a gift. Please don't stop." And I think that kind of galvanized me really to just continue and see where it takes me. It really, at some point, I just kind of like look back. I'm like, wow, people are actually paying to read my books. I'm doing this full time now. So it's like, sometimes it's just a kind of like you put in the work, you're passionate about it, and things work out.
Yeah, that's awesome. So who are your writing inspirations, or I like to call them writing heroes?
Mark Lawrence, for sure, is one. I'm part of his Discord from his Patreon, and he's also been a great person to talk to and have advice, and he reads your work, but he's also just, I don't know, he's always ready to give advice where he can, or give his opinion where he can. His work with the Broken Empire series is one of the books that really cemented my love for the fantasy genre in general, and I think that's I could go on and on about Mark Lawrence. Other than that, I really do love Pierce Brown. I just ordered Lightbringer. I'm so excited to read that as well. I love Peter V. Brett, and I think Anthony Ryan is great as well. And I'm currently going through some other books, but I would say right up there at the top of my list is Mark Lawrence.
He seems like a genuinely nice guy too.
He absolutely is. Yeah.
He's on my one day, hopefully soonish, to read list.
Fingers crossed.
Growing, but one day I'll get there.
I do absolutely recommend his newest book, which is The Book That Wouldn't Burn. I think that's like peak Mark Lawrence in a lot of ways.
I've heard really great things about it.
Yeah.
So that's a great segment into, I want to do a spoiler-free chat now about 11th Cycle. For those that have joined that haven't quite read it yet or haven't quite finished it yet, but want to know more about 11th Cycle. So could you give us kind of your elevator pitch about what 11th Cycle is and why people should read it?
Absolutely. I think you can tackle this question from many angles. At the very core, somebody might say, just to get the message across, this is grimdark. It deals with heavy themes. It does not pull any of its punches, and that is by design. My very intention was that it's not violence or anything grim for any gratuitous. It's not supposed to be gratuitous, let's say. I really wanted to take these characters and pull them through such dark events, really instilled a sense of despair and showed perseverance through it all. And in a sense, I would like to think that the reader is also going through this journey as well, also being subjected to these very dark moments and coming out the other side more resilient and for it. And in a sense, I wanted that experience to have a macabre sort of catharsis. That was my intention. I think for anyone who really likes the perhaps something with a slow burn, with some more thought out pacing, with a lot of introspection, and with characters going through very Lovecraftian cities and moments, and coming to terms with something that in essence is almost how would I put it? It's just that these characters are experiencing despair in a very pure state, a very raw state, and that was a lot of my intention. I've had people who've reached out to me and said, this is one of the best books I've ever read, if not the best book I've ever read, specifically for the fact that the characters and their journey was so raw, and I think that's what they took away from it. And I think if that's something that you appreciate, then maybe that's for you.
Awesome. So what makes 11th Cycle different than other grimdark books out there?
So I can only speak to what my intention was, right? Because I'm sure there's going to be somebody who's read it and disagrees on this point.
Right.
But I feel like a lot of grimdark books, like let's take Game of Thrones, for example. I feel like its prose is very much made to, in a sense, bludgeon. It's hard hitting, it's gritty, and it's there for a reason. It doesn't pull any punches in that sake. I wanted something with perhaps a little bit more of a macabre beauty to it, very much flowery prose. For some, perhaps even to the point where it's too much, but it is, for me, by design. The prose is there to paint a hauntingly beautiful picture of a grim, dark story, and that was very, very much my intent.
Yeah, it definitely feels, I don't want to say a softer grimdark than A Song of Ice and Fire, which I'm currently reading for the first time also, but a different feel to it, but still that, your characters are going through the hardest times of their lives, just like George R. R. Martin's characters are, but in a very different world, in a very different sense. So where did you get the idea for 11th Cycle from?
I've spoken to Lens in my marketing about this. It came from my fascination with this type of storytelling from FromSoft games, particularly Dark Souls. The sense that there's a lot of abstract storytelling. There is environmental storytelling. There are bits and pieces of clues here and there that are never overtly linked together, but that one can, if one pays enough attention, that once you read, connections will be made. over time. That was one of the biggest motivations for me. I was looking for a book like that, couldn't really find it. And I started to have the story kind of come together to me. And one part was like, ooh, how cool would it be if one of the strongest beings that is practically a god, the sun is its a good eye and the moon is its blind eye, um, and what if the world is, not necessarily flat, but it is limited within the scope of the har, which is the mist encircling it? What if there's a sake of um, oblivion that is about to swallow the world? It was a lot of that, and then the bits and pieces of the story started coming together. It was very much based on my inspirations and my take on those inspirations.
So did your characters or your story come first, or kind of an amalgamation of both?
I think first off, it depends on the book that I'm writing. Sometimes I have a cool concept, and then that comes after that. And sometimes I have some cool characters. I'm like, well, I need a story to be able to insert them into. Here, I think it was a bit of both. Okay. Delilah, so treading into maybe minor spoilers, so if anyone doesn't want to know. But like Delilah, for example, was a character concept I came up with for a D&D campaign, for like a cleric character or priest character that is very warm, very selfless, very much like a kind smile, a saintly, beautiful face, and wants to heal everyone. But then, you don't know about the scars underneath her skin. You don't know that she has like that she has suicidal ideation, that she has this sort of survivor complex, sort of thing. And I love that concept of a D&D character, and it just brought me to like, oh, I'm going to insert her into this story. Yeah, same with other characters as well. It was a bit of a mishmash between the two.
Awesome. So speaking of spoilers, we're going to slide now into our spoiler chat. So if there's anyone out there watching now that hasn't read 11th Cycle yet, and you don't want to be spoiled, go and read it and then come back and watch the rest of this conversation. So who was your favorite and or easiest character to write?
I think there were different times when one character may have been easier than another. I think it depends at the point in their journey. So if we're talking spoilers, everybody has been warned, right?
Yeah.
Nora has one of the toughest journeys of any of the characters. It was very easy to write her when she was driven by fury. But when I had to write her going through her disability, it was very challenging. I did have to, I had sensitivity readers. I had people with disabilities who I contacted. I'm like, teach me. I read books on the subject. Sitting Pretty by Rebecca Taussig, great read that I absolutely recommend. And I studied up on that before I wrote her character. Then, I don't know, like Chroma may have had the shortest chapters out of all of the other characters, but I really enjoyed writing this individual who does have an identity crisis with the fact that, okay, they are descended from a warrior tribe, but they live almost like prisoners inside this, settlement encampment. And I think it's not so much, I would say, a question of who did you have the easiest time writing. I think it's a question of like, who did you enjoy writing the most? And in essence, it's all of them. And the more fun I had, the easier it was to write them as well.
So you spoke a little bit about how Nora's journey was one of the hardest to write. Were there any that, like, every time you came across that character, you're like, oh my gosh, now I have to write this character again? Or you said you loved writing all of them. Was there any that you had trepidation when you came across writing?
A little bit. I think again at different points in time. Delilah, I feel like was the least troubling. I think there were times when Chroma didn't feel as exciting for me to write, and I think Araphil, writing him within the scope of his upbringing and within the scope of his Clarion nobility, I think that was sometimes a little bit harder to write. But other than that, I wouldn't ever say that anything in the story itself was extremely difficult. Perhaps the 11th seed, Ivaris, was because like the challenge with Ivaris was very much not just the fact that it's that I had to write the prose for their chapters as very abstract, so that's not clear, but it was also very much that I had to write them within the context of like, okay, the language that the elders use, that I try to make Shakespearean English and stuff like that. I think Ivaris in that sense was very much their own challenge.
Okay. Did you have a favorite scene that you wrote?
I have a few.
Okay.
I think the one that really stuck with me, I don't know if you got to this part, is when Araphil is carrying Nora through the field and they're the surrounding witnesses.
Yeah.
That image always kind of stuck in my mind to the point where I'm like, I would love to, I don't know, have that commissioned as art. The other moments that I loved writing were the battle scenes at Grey Hill. There's something about building that anticipation with the Akar that was such a joy to write. The meeting with the blacksmith, I had so much fun writing all of that, everything that happened in Mount Morniar. I think a lot of that, and that's something I'm really excited with book 2, because I get to experiment a lot more with a little bit of the strangeness, the weird stuff.
Yeah. What was the hardest scene for you to write?
I think for the people who know, so it's spoilers, I would say the rape scene. I think it's hard in the sense that like you want the scene to be raw, or in my case, I want the scene to be as raw as possible, and that invites a level of insidiousness. I really did not pull punches with that, and that was, didn't leave me excited or anything. It wasn't joyful, but it was something that I felt was very, very much important to Nora's story. And I think in hindsight, there's a lot that I could say that like, oh, this was not as good as I wanted. But if it's like in the moment, yeah, I think that's pretty much the hardest scene that I had to write.
So you mentioned book 2.
Yes.
I want to talk about the future of the series, the Mistland series, or any other, future writing projects that you have in mind that you want to chat about.
Absolutely. I'm currently on book 2. I'm writing this parallel with another sci-fi book that I think this month. I'm more than halfway through with editing it. I'm hopeful that this month is the last month that I'm editing the sci-fi book. And for book 2 of the 11th Cycle series, I'm more than 50,000 words in. So I'm looking to be done with the first draft early 2024 is the hope. Other than that, I have a lot of stuff planned. I do want to do a cyberpunk novel at some point in the future. And I have some other projects also in the works. That's the good thing with me, that I don't feel like I'm ever going to run out of any ideas anytime soon. The challenge is going to be to rein myself in and to ignore the new shiny idea and focus on what's already on my plate.
Yeah. Going back to 11th Cycle for a second, what do you want your readers to come away with after reading 11th Cycle?
my hope is that people who read it walk away with a sense of catharsis, that they are put through such a grueling trial, going alongside this journey with the other characters, and they come out the other side thinking that, oh, the characters survived that, and even though they went through that, they survived it, and I survived reading that, the stories, which sounds like, you're reading it, why wouldn't you survive it? But I do think there's a sense of, and that's something I loved about, the games that inspired the book. You always have the choice of thinking, this is too difficult, I'm going to put the game or the book down. That's always a choice that people have. And I wanted the same sense for this book. And I do want there to be a sense of catharsis, that yes, it's tough. Yes, it's not supposed to be easy, but you went through that, you experienced the journey alongside these characters. And I hope that there is some cathartic feeling after that.
Awesome. Well, Kian, those are all the questions that I had for you. Is there anything that we didn't hit that you wanted to talk about?
Not. I'm just trying to think right now. No, not necessarily. I think, like, if we're talking about what I want people to take away from the book and all of that, I think what is most important to me is that people understand that the book was always supposed to be a measure of, like, hey, it's a raw story. It's supposed to be raw. And I take immense pride in the fact that I feel like I did achieve that. And I think anyone who wants to try out the book or anything like that, keep that in mind. It's I've heard, like, Shauna Lawless, that wrote Children of God and Fighting Men, said that it's she's never read a book like it. And that's the biggest praise that I can ask for from an accomplished writer, because it's something new. So if anyone's like, hey, I want to try a new challenge, maybe this is it.
Absolutely. Well, thank you so much for joining us today, Kian. It's an absolute pleasure having you on.
Likewise.
And thank you to everyone out there who either watched this live or is watching this later. Again, if you haven't picked up 11th Cycle yet and you're looking for something different, something that's hard-hitting, go ahead and pick up 11th Cycle. It's been entered in SPFBO, and I've heard fantastic things about it, and I'm enjoying my journey through it so far. And join us next week for something totally different. We're going to have Tori Tekken on to talk about her book, Phase, which is also an SPFBO entry. Totally different than 11th Cycle, but I'm looking forward to that. And again, one last time, Kian, thank you for joining us today, all the way from Vienna.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for having me.
Yeah, everyone, have a great day, y'all.
See you, everyone. Thank you.